Friends, I'm happy to announce that Straight Talk has partnered with Blue Line Roasting Company to bring you delicious coffee to enjoy while you listen to this podcast. Blue Line Roasting Company also serves our first responders by giving a portion of all net proceeds to numerous organizations who support them. Order today at bluelineroasting.com. That's bluelineroasting.com. And don't forget, when you join the Straight Shooter VIP Club, you'll receive a free coffee sample and a mug, plus invitations to private podcast events. In order for a totalitarian takeover to occur, you have to do two things. You have to control the media, and you have to take away the people's guns. And that's coming next. And if you don't think so, I think you're dangerously naive. You're listening to the Straight Talk Podcast. I am your host, fondly referred to as America's Sheriff David Clark. Welcome to the program. You know, in the last podcast, and if you didn't get a chance to listen to it, download it, do so, and tell your friends to check it out and subscribe as well. But I talked about this story that came out where Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, issued a joint statement trying to discourage Trump supporters from going into the streets to protest if the indictment were to come down. And obviously, you know that the indictment has. But I talked about how disgusted I was with that. Look, the right to protest, protected, codified in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. It is a right of the people. It's a God-given right. And why these two so-called conservatives, well, let me say this before I go on. The one thing you're going to get out of this program, and that's why I took the time in trying to find a name, Straight Talk. Now, I happen to be a fan of Marjorie Taylor Greene, but that doesn't cloud my thinking if I have to say something that I disagree with or say something that's not flattering about people that I like and support. All right, I don't let that get in the way. That would be a disservice to you. That would be a waste of your time. And that's why I said, you know, this is not going to be a cookie cutter type podcast. But getting back to it, I was appalled that they would tell anybody, but much less Trump supporters, not to go into the streets to protest the indictment of Donald Trump. And I couldn't figure out why. So Donald Trump's been indicted. And on the day of the indictment, when he shows up in Manhattan court, guess who's there? Marjorie Taylor Greene to lead a protest. Now, look, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's rough around the edges. She doesn't have a filter. She is a flamethrower. No doubt about it. But that doesn't matter to me. I still like her because she's a fighter. She just doesn't have great political skills in doing so. Her timing's off. So she tells Trump supporters, don't go into the streets to protest when Donald Trump is indicted. But then she shows up. And sure as heck, she searches out video cameras, TV cameras, and she's talking through a bullhorn, trying to lead the rally, speaking to the people who were there in support of Donald Trump. And she gets drowned out by anti-Trump supporters. And she ends up having to leave. That's not a good look. As a matter of fact, it's a horrible look. It makes her seem like a media hound. Let me get my 5 minutes here in front of the camera, and then I'll leave, leaving everybody else there. But again, you know, it's kind of like that do as I say, not as I do, which is more typical of liberals. They say one thing and then they're doing it themselves. So I just thought that I'd bring that up, that I was disappointed. Doesn't mean that I don't like her. Doesn't mean I won't support her anymore. But my gosh, you're going to lead a protest rally, but then you're going to tell Trump supporters don't go on the street to protest. That didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Anyway, here's what I want to get to next. You know, after that disastrous midterm election, where there was supposed to be this red wave of conservatives and Republicans that were going to be swept into not only the Congress of the United States, but into state houses and governor's races and so on and so forth, and it never materialized. And here in Wisconsin, we just finished a state Supreme Court race where the conservative got wiped out by like 12 percentage points over a politically active, uber lefty Milwaukee County judge. So now she gets a 10-year seat on the state Supreme Court. And now the balance of our state Supreme Court has flipped. It's in the hands of, there's 7 members. It's in the hands of the liberals now, 4 politically active, uber lefty justices to 3 conservative. And we're in for some rocky times here in the state of Wisconsin. Anyway, we come out of that. And by the way, the conservative candidate, he got clobbered money-wise. There's money pouring in from the outside. But anyway, he didn't have enough money. He didn't really have a message. He ran a pedestrian campaign, but that's for a different day. I come across another article. Here's the headline. Republicans are looking for Senate candidates who are filthy rich. Listen to that headline. Republicans are looking for Senate candidates who are filthy rich. It says here, Democrats have been outraising Republicans in the past 2 cycles. Republicans have come up with a possible solution. This is the solution? Do you know what this reeks of? Minority candidates and women candidates for the U.S. Senate need not apply if you're going to run under the GOP banner, because they're looking for candidates who are filthy rich. You know what that means? Basically, old white guys. And I'm not here to play race politics. You know me better than that. But the GOP has an image problem, and they've had it for quite some time. They're pasted by the Democrats as being the party of the filthy rich. Filthy white rich. Filthy rich, not filthy white. And I, along with others, have been trying to fight this smear. That's not the total makeup of the conservative movement in the United States of America. The hell with the GOP. But here I am trying to fight it. And then we get slapped in the face with, they're looking for Senate candidates who are filthy rich. Here's some of what the article said. Here's a quote. Republicans face an existential crisis that won't be solved overnight, but we need to figure out how to mitigate the damage in the short term, said Kevin McLaughlin, the executive director of the NRSC, that's the National Republican Senatorial Committee, in 2020. So he said it in 2020. Recruiting strong candidates who can both self-fund and win general elections is a great first step. Goes on to say here, not all the potential 2024 recruits are equally wealthy, and there is certainly a difference between a candidate worth $1 billion and one worth a couple hundred million. But even 1 or 2 candidates who are willing to make a significant investment can reduce the burden on the party committee and allied super PACs, which are then more free to spend in other races. Now, here's what that says to me. We don't want to do the heavy lifting. We suck at fundraising. And so we want somebody else to spend their own money so we don't have to work as hard fundraising. That's what it says to me. And I don't want to hear about this, we need better candidates. No, we don't. Are you trying to tell me that Fetterman was a better candidate than Dr. Oz? Are you trying, and by the way, Fetterman wasn't super rich, filthy rich. And Raphael Warnock in Georgia, he wasn't that much better of a candidate than Herschel Walker. Raphael Warnock wasn't filthy rich. And Joe Biden. The Democrats took a guy who was in the early stages of dementia that we all saw before the 2020 election. They took a guy, Fetterman, who was just released from a hospital suffering clinical depression. They took a guy in Ralph Warnock who was accused of being a domestic abuser. Those aren't good candidates, and they're not filthy rich. And somehow they're able to cobble together a huge amount of money to overcome the flaws. That's what they do. We're looking for the perfect candidate. They raise enough money where they can neutralize the flaws so that when the attacks come, they can counter them with counter ads. That stuff costs money. It costs a lot of money to run really, governor's races, House races, Senate races. And people wonder, well, where does all the money go? Well, you got to pay operatives. But it mainly goes into direct mail, campaign pieces, TV ads, and radio ads. And that stuff's expensive. But you can mask over a flawed candidate. So if we really thought that Herschel Walker was a flawed candidate, and if we thought Dr. Oz was a flawed candidate, and if we thought, we didn't, but some, that Trump was a flawed candidate, yeah, they all had their flaws. The Democrats were able to mask theirs with fundraising, and Republicans can't. So they got to find the perfect candidate. The perfect candidate is not always the best candidate. Maybe the perfect candidate doesn't have a vision, isn't able to connect with people at ground level, isn't inspiring. But basically, according to the Republicans here for their Senate candidates, I don't know many billionaire women. I know one, Diane Hendricks. She lives here in the state of Wisconsin. She's in the Forbes top, 50 wealthiest people in America. She's worth billions. She's not going to run for office. She doesn't want anything to do with this. And it's smart. She funds campaigns. And then you look at how many Hispanic billionaires do you know? How many black billionaires do you know? There's a couple. Most of them are athletes. Tiger Woods is a billionaire. LeBron James is a billionaire. But short of that, there's a couple other people, but, if you're going to try to change the face of this party and the image, and image matters. It matters to independent voters. It matters to the people that we're trying to recruit to get involved with the conservative movement and to get behind conservative candidates. I'm not talking about that crap DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm not talking about that. But this party is struggling in terms of the face of the party to make it look like America, a melting pot. That's what I'm not talking about. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm talking about a melting pot. But when you're going to talk arrogantly like this, and that's what this is, it reeks of arrogant. Let me read some more here. Here's a quote. Listen to the hubris coming out of these bigwig elitists in the Republican Party. Here's a quote. In politics as in life, money doesn't buy happiness, but poverty doesn't buy a damn thing, said Senator John Neely Kennedy, Republican of Louisiana. Continues the quote. So if you've got a candidate who can self-fund, you can spend your money elsewhere. So that's all they're interested in, people who can self-fund. Not everybody can self-fund. Most Democrat candidates cannot self-fund. But they outwork Republicans in the area of fundraising. Let's take a look at some numbers. I have a document here. I subscribe to this guy's newsletter. He sends me in. He's a marketer. So he's talking about marketing the GOP and the conservative movement and how to do a better job of marketing in terms of fundraising. Listen to this. Liberals have over 20,000 nonprofit organizations, and conservatives have about 1,500. Liberals raise about 700% more money from their nonprofits than conservatives, 20 billion versus 3.5 billion. So from the nonprofits, liberals raise 20 billion, conservatives 3 billion. Here's another one. Liberals hire about 700% more donors. Liberals have about 700% more donors than conservatives. 20 million versus 3.5 million. In the 2022 election cycle, Democrat politician candidates on average raised 65% more dollars than Republican candidates in critical must-win states. And you wonder why we saw no red wave? They were taking it for granted. They knew that the Democrats would outspend them. They didn't do anything about it. So it says here in the November 6, 2022 election, the vast majority of issues favored the Republican Party and its candidates, including inflation, the wide open southern border, Democrats' war on fossil fuels, the sky-high price of gas, defund the police, a rising crime wave, especially murder. And on top of that, about 70% of the voters felt the country was going in the wrong direction, and they had a negative feeling about the Democrat president. And the Democrats were able to put a block on the red wave. You know why? The reason is the Republican conservative leaders threw away a great opportunity to sweep a massive number of Democrats out of the office. Clearly, here's key. Clearly, the Democrat leaders outworked, outsmarted, and outstrategized Republicans and conservatives. That's why they didn't get wiped out. Not because, and this is what these people like to use, all these elitists in the Republican Party. Well, we got to, Mitch McConnell, we need better candidates. No, you need to do a better job of raising money. And then you can take even pretty good candidates and get them over the finish line. You could even take bad candidates like Fetterman, like Warnock, like Biden, and get them over the finish line. So let's drill down a little deeper into this. Let's look at some of the spending, the top 10 governor's races by most money raised. Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, the Democrat, raised $152 million. Darren Bailey, his Republican opponent, $1.2 million. $1.2 million to 152 for the Democrat. In Georgia, now Brian Kemp won. This one is an outlier. Brian Kemp raised $76 million in his governor's race, in the governor's race. Stacey Abrams, the Democrat, raised $113 million. That's $40 million more than the Republican. Stacey Abrams, another flawed candidate. In Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, the Democrat, raised $72 million. He won the governor's race in Pennsylvania. Doug Mastriano, the Republican, $8 million. $72 million to $8 million. In Virginia, here's another outlier. Glenn Youngkin, who won, the Republican, raised $53 million. His opponent, the Democrat, Terry McAuliffe, $68 million. So Youngkin was outraised by $15 million. And he still won, but that's an outlier. New York, governor's race, Kathy Hochul raised $60 million. Her Republican opponent, Lee Zeldin, $27 million. These figures are stunning. Wisconsin, where I live, Tony Evers, Democrat, raised $39 million. Tim Michels, the Republican, $28 million. Now, Tim Michels is one of those filthy rich candidates that the Republicans said they're looking for. Tim Michels spent $14 million of his own personal wealth to win the primary. And he was hoping for financial help in the general, and it never came. So basically what they're asking, when this headline says Republicans looking for filthy rich candidates to run, they don't have a problem if they waste their money. Tim Michels spent $14 million of his own personal wealth to lose. These people actually want these people to do this? They're mercenaries. One more here, Michigan, big governor's race there. Gretchen Whitmer, the Democrat, raised $31 million. Tudor Dixon, the Republican, who we're hearing so much about, $8 million. $31 million for Whitmer, $8 for Tudor Dixon. You cannot win a governor's race getting outspent like that. Gretchen Whitmer was a flawed candidate, but she had enough money to overcome the flaws. So check this out. The 10 largest political action committees, PACs, by money raised in the 21-22 cycle. 10 largest. Total Democrat PACs raised $130 million. $3 billion. You know how much the Republican PACs raised? Top 10? $1.9 billion. Now let's look at some of the Senate races. This is why they lost, ladies and gentlemen. Like the article said, they got outsmarted, outworked, out-hustled, and out-strategized. That's why those candidates lost. They got no help from the Republican Party, nationally or locally. Then they want to blame the candidate. Wow, they were a flawed candidate. The Democrats run more flawed candidates than Republicans do, but they're somehow able to, like I said, cobble together something to get them across the finish line. So here's the top 10 Senate races by most money raised as reported to the FEC in the 2021-2022 cycle. Georgia, it's a good place to start. Senate race, right? Raphael Warnock versus Herschel Walker. Raphael Warnock raised $150 million to Herschel Walker's $73 million. And you wonder why Herschel Walker lost? Yeah, he got pounded with smears, lies, but he didn't have the money to overcome it with counter ads. Like I said, you can mask a flawed candidate. You can mask missteps. Yes, he made some missteps, but that's not why he lost. Because when you misstep, if you have the money, you can overcome the unforced errors and the missteps. Pennsylvania, we talked about that earlier. John Fetterman raised $73 million in his Senate run. Dr. Oz, $50 million. Arizona, Mark Kelly, the Democrat, raised $88 million to Blake Masters, the Republican, his $14 million. $88 million to $14 million. And you wonder why Blake Masters didn't win? Ohio, here's an outlier. J.D. Vance won, but he was outspent $56 million to $15 million. $50 million more that the Democrat candidate had. That's why I said that's an outlier. Wisconsin. Ron Johnson, the Republican, two-time incumbent, razor-thin victory. He won by 12,000 votes out of 2 million cast to a relative unknown, Mandela Barnes. Mandela Barnes, a black Democrat, was a flawed candidate. They were able to mask some of his flaws. He raised $41 million, Ron Johnson, $35 million. So Mandela Barnes, a Democrat, outraised Johnson, but not enough to overcome the flaws. And he's running against a two-time incumbent. Mandela Barnes, he didn't have a pot to piss in. The Democrats, against Ron Johnson, they weren't seeking some wealthy. As a matter of fact, there were some wealthy candidates in the race. They all dropped out so they could coalesce around one guy, and he picked a black guy. Hedge fund A hedge fund manager was in the running as a Democrat in the primary. He dropped out. He could have self-funded. But see, the Democrats don't rely on that. No, we'll take care. We know where to find money. We know which trees to shake, money trees, to get money for these races. Mandela Barnes, among other flaws, was tax delinquent. Yeah, of course he had to admit it, but he says, yeah, I got into some, and they almost beat a 2-time incumbent U.S. Senator, Ron Johnson. Nevada. See, these were all, the ones I'm going through here, these were Senate races that the Republicans thought they could pick up and take over the Senate, and they got wiped out. Then the elitists from the GOP want to talk about flawed candidate. We need better candidates. No. You need to start raising money. Get off your rear ends and stop being out hustled by the Democrats. They're like carpenter ants. The Democrats. YouTube carpenter ants. It's fascinating. All they do is build the nest, constantly working to build the nest. You want to know why it's so hard to get away from or get rid of carpenter ants? Because even if you call in an exterminator, some of them are going to get away. And you know what they do? They just start building a new nest. That's like Democrats. They never go away. You can really never get rid of them. So anyway, another one here, Nevada, they thought they could capture, the GOP. Catherine Masto, the Democrat, raised $64 million. Adam Laxalt, the Republican, $18 million. And then the last one here, New Hampshire, that's another Senate seat the GOP thought they could pick off. Maggie Hassan, $41 million, the Democrat. Her Republican opponent, Don Bolduc, $4 million. He got outspent $41 million to $4. So the totals here, top 10 Democrat Senate races, they raised $635 million. Top Republican Senate races, $37 million. And then this had nothing to do, ladies and gentlemen, nothing to do with flawed candidates and needing better candidates. The GOP bigwigs need to get off their asses. Get rid of this high-mindedness. We're looking for filthy rich. I wouldn't even be able to get a seat at the table under this model because I'm not filthy rich. So think of how many even good candidates can't even get a seat at the table. Very few of the Democrats in power anywhere, they're not filthy rich. Gavin Newsom is not filthy rich. You can go on and on, the House and the Senate. Very few are filthy rich. The Democrats. Very few. If they want to start winning elections, and like the article said, missed out on a huge opportunity, threw away a great opportunity to sweep a massive number of Democrats out of office. Clearly, the Democrat leadership. Clearly, the Democrat leaders outworked, outsmarted, and out-strategized Republicans and conservatives. That's what happened in the aftermath of the midterm disaster. That is why there was no red tidal wave in 2022. You talk about race, crime, and politics. Some folks lose sleep over this, but not me, because I sleep just fine on my Giza Dream Sheets and pillow from My Pillow, especially this new 2.0. If you haven't gotten yours yet, you are missing out. Just go to mypillow.com and use promo code Clark, that's CLARKE, and save up to 66% off. The direct link is also available on my website, americasheriff.com. Get a great night's sleep so we can continue the fight. Attention, Patriots. Looking for a great book? Let me recommend The Greatest Story Ever Told. The We the People Bible is available for the first time in history. This Bible is for those who believe it is time to give America back to God. Faith is being targeted, and our country's founding beliefs are being targeted. The We the People Bible is restoring what there is an attempt to remove: the preservation of faith and the preservation of America. One of the most unique features of this Bible is that it includes the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and the Pledge of Allegiance as a bonus. This makes it a perfect heirloom to pass on to the generations to come. It is time to give America back to God, and this Bible is a great way to do just that. Get one for yourself and another as a gift for a friend or family member. Go to americasheriff.com and click on the Bible link to order today while supplies last.
Mainstream media has turned into nothing more than state-run propaganda. Bulldog TV was founded by Americans fighting for America to restore the fourth branch of government. Support alternative media like Bulldog TV by following them on Facebook and Truth Social.
Friends, I want to thank you for listening to today's episode of Straight Talk with yours truly, America Sheriff David Clark. And a special thank you also goes out to our sponsors. My goal, as always, is to break down these complex and many times controversial issues and bring it to you straight with a little dose of common sense, no media bias, no talking points, just truth. And this podcast would not be possible without your support. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please leave a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite place to listen. And please share this message of common sense on social media. For more content, be sure to follow me on Truth Social, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And just a reminder, we'd love for you to join our Straight Shooters VIP podcast club for only $5 per month. And with that membership, you'll receive invitations to attend private podcast events throughout the year as a VIP guest when we come to your town. Plus, if you join today, you'll also receive a free coffee mug and a sample of our private label coffee as long as supplies last. Subscribe and join at americasheriff.com. This podcast is brought to you by americasheriff.com with executive producer Judy Wilkinson of JLWilkinsonConsulting and producer Josh Wentz in partnership with our friends at Bulldog Media. If you are interested in partnering with Straight Talk Podcasts or having me speak in your area, please contact Judy at JLWilkinsonConsulting@gmail.com, 706-518-2116. That's JLWilkinsonConsulting@gmail.com. Phone number 706-518-2116.